as long as they are enjoying themselves and are putting hard work into it and are creating something that people want to see, I think that they're great. Hello there, welcome to the show. It's time to sit down and put in those earbuds so as not to disturb the neighbors, because this is Off Book, a podcast about Broadway, movies, TV shows, and so many other nerdy things. I'm your host, Marc Stoufer III, and today I'm going to be talking low-budget musicals and how they compare to their professional counterparts. While they're often not thought of as low budget, a lot of the musical episodes of TV shows are technically low budget because they're working on a very shortened production schedule and they don't have the resources that a movie musical or a Broadway musical would have. Yet a lot of audiences expect them to be of the same level. So they're trying to cram as much quality out of very limited resources as they can, which is exactly what a low budget musical is by definition. There are a couple different kinds of TV musicals. First of all, there's the live TV musical, which I talked about a little while ago on the channel, which is really an entirely different kind of production. But there are also TV shows that have musical episodes often, and then there are the TV shows that have like the one musical episode. And I'm really going to be talking about both of those because they work off a lot of the same production schedule and have a very similar budget to do the episode. The first kind is a show like Riverdale, which is famous for its pretty common musical episodes where, for those of you that don't know, Riverdale is set in a high school, and so a lot of their episodes focus around the main characters in the high school putting on whatever show that they're going to use the music from. So, for example, they did an episode with the music from Heathers. So they were putting on a production of Heathers at the school that Riverdale is set at, and in doing so were able to perform the musical numbers, kind of. The thing that makes these episodes distinct, though, is that they aren't actually using the music necessarily as it was meant to be used in the original production. They're taking the music and they're changing some lyrics, they're cutting out verses, they're adding verses. They're really just kind of taking the song as a base layer, and then they're turning it into whatever they feel like they need it to be for the episode. So in addition to changing the lyrics, they're also changing the musical underscoring, they're changing voice parts, they're not even using all the songs from the show, to kind of pick and choose a couple songs that they want to put in the episode. Which makes sense. Cast albums are normally pretty long, and so trying to get all of the music into an episode and also have the actual plot of the episode can be hard. But a large complaint among the people that are watching these is that it doesn't really feel like they actually care about the original musical. It feels like they were trying to use the original musical to get publicity for their show. It feels like they didn't actually care about Heathers. They just knew that Heathers was popular with the same demographic that Riverdale was popular with, and so it was a marketing decision. And generally, marketing decisions don't fare well with an audience because they feel like it was made more about trying to get the money or the viewership instead of actually creating good quality entertainment. With Riverdale specifically, it also appears that the cast of the show and the creative team of the show aren't really well versed in musical theater outside of the show, and so it's a little bit weird that they would constantly be reusing musicals without actually being a fan of musicals. It just feels very produced. It doesn't feel like they actually wanted to honor this musical and do it well. It feels more like they wanted to capitalize on the popularity of the musical. But these episodes will normally have anywhere from a little bit to a lot of choreography. It's a lot more of the camera moves. It looks a lot more like a modern movie musical rather than the old-timey ones that have these big song and dance numbers. And the singing does kind of happen randomly and isn't normally addressed. There's normally pretty okay singing. It's pretty okay dancing when they do it, but it's nothing really spectacular. It's not supposed to be super big. It's supposed to be okay enough for you to watch it. And the overwhelming responses to these are pretty meh. But people keep watching them, so they keep making them. Riverdale's been doing this for a while, and people continue to watch them, even if they're not as good as the original musical, or as good as the TV adaptation of that musical would have been. The other kind of show is the show that has a one-off musical episode. These are shows like The Flash or Once Upon a Time, which aren't musical shows. They don't have musical numbers aside from the instrumental underscoring of the scenes and maybe an occasional character singing the song, but it's not, a musical number. And then they'll have one episode in the entire series where all the characters are singing and dancing, and it is musical logic. It's, singing and dancing is just part of what you do. No one's questioning it. No one's rehearsing it. It just happens. And there are some times when one or more characters in these episodes will acknowledge that it's weird, but the majority of the people are just doing it. It's not like they're putting on a musical. They are just singing. Like I mentioned, I'm going to be looking mainly at The Flash's musical episode and the Once Upon a Time's musical episode because they do very similar things, but they do them a little bit differently.
All I wanna do is come running running home to you. Come running home to you. I'm your super friend. Super friend. If you ever need a hand, I'll be there in a flash.
Barry.
That was funny.
Take a little look around. Oh, if you're looking down, put a little love in your heart.
The Flash's musical episode saw several musical numbers where pretty much the entire cast was singing and dancing, and they did a pretty good job in my opinion. Something that is important to note is that this episode didn't use original music. There was one or two original songs, but most of them were reused songs from old-timey theater. But it was songs that kind of came into popular culture, so it was different than Riverdale, in that it didn't seem like they had taken it out of context because it already kind of had a life outside of context. And what made it work for me, I think, is that they were kind of creating this context around the song. They were building a situation for this song to make sense, instead of it feeling, at least the way it does to me in Riverdale, when it doesn't really make any sense as to why the songs are there. The songs worked in this episode. There are also some episodes that actually do write the original music.
There's a powerful magic when two hearts are one, and the unhappy ending, let that be the queens, with our daughters fade and stay. Soon the dark one will feel the fire of this pirate's world. Feel the fire of his world. A happy beginning now is ours.
The Once Upon a Time musical episode. It was a very traditional episode, but it was all done through singing, and they acknowledged why, and then they kept going, treating it like a normal episode, but a lot of the major plot points were told through music that was original to the episode. They're not reused songs, they're not rewritten songs, they were specifically written for this episode. They had the characters' names, they're talking about actual events. They all tie together, they all sound cohesive, even if they have their own distinct styles, they all sound kind of cohesive, and like they were written by the same person, because they were. So it gives it this sense of originality, but it also does take more time, and it also means that the creative team has to hire a songwriter. This costs more, it has more time with the production of an episode, and a lot of times they don't get more time for this musical episode, even though they're doing probably twice the amount of work to write music, rehearse the music, film the musical number, record the track that they can lip sync to. When they're filming the scene, they have to do all of this in the same amount of time they have to film any other episode. So you find a very similar final product to the one that Riverdale often has, where it's all pretty meh. Some of the songs are good, some of the songs aren't good, some of the songs make sense and some of them don't. Because these actors aren't musical theater actors necessarily, they're TV actors, and so some of them can sing, and some of them can't. The Flash episode had a lot of musically talented actors. On the other hand, Once Upon a Time wrote music that was specific to the actors' vocal ranges, and so you get a little bit of higher production quality in terms of the vocal ability if you either have musically talented people on your cast, or you write to the musical talents you have, even if that means it's not quite as flashy. The choreography is pretty similar because they have the same amount of time they would normally have, so it's more rushed. But, generally these TV shows are not going to be as good as a Broadway musical, or not going to be as good as a movie musical in terms of singing ability or choreography, or even, the plot coherence and just the overall tone of the show is going to have to change because, if this is a gritty CW drama and now they're singing and dancing, it's going to be a little bit weird. But overall, at least in my opinion, they're pretty good. They're fun to watch. They're not perfect, but they're good enough to enjoy. The production quality, however, is, it's okay. Today's episode is sponsored by Subpar Song Solutions. If you have a TV show that you want to do one or more musical episodes of, it can be hard to write original music for it, and even harder to find existing songs to reuse. That's why Subpar Song Solutions is so great. Just give them the plot of your episode, and they'll write a Broadway musical with songs to fit it, but with a slightly different plot. It'll run on Broadway just long enough to gain a moderate fan base that can say, "Oh yeah, I think I've heard of that," when they see your episode. And it's all backed by their quality promise. It'll either be pretty average for a TV musical, or just above a bad YouTube sketch. Speaking of, another similar but completely different genre of low-budget musicals are the internet musicals. The ones that don't have a fancy production team or professional staff. They may have a creative team, but it's people that are generally doing it for free and are just coming together. They're friends, they know the creators personally. This isn't some star-studded cast that's been on Broadway. This isn't Tony-nominated composers. This is just some people having fun who are generally pretty musically talented. If they're doing this, who don't necessarily have a degree in it, they're just having fun. And this is where you start to get a lot of variance in the quality, because YouTube is a platform that doesn't have any sort of gate to it. You know, you have to pitch a TV show to an executive. It has to get greenlit. It has to get made. It has to get renewed. The board has to approve your submission for a musical episode before you can even start making it. Then you have to submit all of the lyrics and scripts to people. And there's a long ladder of quality control on a TV show that does not exist in YouTube. If you want quality control, you have to make quality control. YouTube does not care what you upload as long as it doesn't violate the terms of service. But most musicals probably won't. Anyway, there are some musicals that just aren't good. People want to be musical but aren't. You know, sometimes there are other qualities that can redeem them. You know, like I said, these are probably just friends having fun, and that is fun to watch, and maybe it's very creative and it's very raw because it didn't have the quality control, and sometimes that's fun to watch. But in terms of musical style, the production value just isn't there. There are some that are very expensive. It's a YouTuber that has professional equipment. It looks like it could have been on a TV show, even though it was just the people on the internet. What I'm looking more at is the kind of the middle there. The musicals that are pretty okay, that aren't super great, but you share with your friends, you'd watch again, etc. There's one in particular called The Internet is Down. It's a one-number musical. That's what a lot of these are. They're not multi-number musicals very often because that just, the more numbers you add, the more complicated it gets, logistically speaking.
Where do I put my hands? How do I function now? How will I live now that the internet is down?
What's interesting about this is, I can't really show you since it's a podcast, but the choreography is really more blockography. I feel like there's probably a term for that better than blockography, but somewhere in between blocking and choreography. Choreography being the dance that you're doing, and the blocking being the movements of the actors, and specifically in film, trying to avoid getting in a frame or blocking anybody else in the frame, just making sure you look good from the perspective of the camera. And so this musical has a lot of the kind of choreography that it really is just fancy blocking. So there is some dancing, but it's really more just, you're going to walk here, and then you're going to cross here, and then you'll do a spin. But it's mostly just moving. It's not so much dancing per se. But it kind of does this thing where it looks like dancing, but it's not so much dancing because that would take more work. It's something that is pretty simple to do because you have to also film it. So it's not just making it look good, it's making it look good in the eye of the camera, which can be hard. As far as music goes, it's original, which is very common for the internet. You generally will find that it's original. There are some parodies or some covers that are fully staged, but generally if it's going to be staged, it's going to be original. And the singing is good, the lyrics good, the production value is very good. Is it as good as a TV show might have been? Probably not, just because the TV show has actual professionals working on this and several rounds of edits, whereas this, I don't actually know the credentials of the person who wrote it. Maybe they are an actual composer, but this isn't a Broadway musical. This is something that they're doing online, and there's really only so much quality you can put into something online until it just gets too overdone and your online audience stops liking it. But the production value of this is pretty good. It's enjoyable, it's very watchable, it's shareable, it's very well done, and it very well fulfills the kind of musical it's trying to be. Pretty small, it's pretty intimate, it doesn't have too much dancing, but it also isn't just walking, it's kind of in the center. It seems very realistic. On the other hand, you have something like this.
The outside world recoils in fear, thinking if they slip up, they'll get locked up in here. I don't wanna be free, leave me in luxury. If I tried to live this good out there, I'd have to pay 1,000 air, 'cause I don't wanna be free.
This musical number is called I Don't Want to Be Free. YouTuber Markiplier did a YouTube original series called A Heist with Markiplier. It's a choose your own adventure. Every so often you get to make choices that continue to change the path you're on. And one of the paths leads you to a musical number in a prison about an inmate that doesn't want to leave. And this is kind of the opposite of the last musical that I talked about. It is not at all realistic. It is fully blown choreography. It's very impressive vocals with the traditional lead singer and then backup singers that you find often in traditional music, but also even sometimes on Broadway. You'll have the main character singing, and then you'll have the ensemble backing them up, doing backing vocals, or even just sounds like an ah no, which sounds weird when I say it, but sounds better when they do. And you have a lot of that. You have theatrical lighting to try to make it look even less realistic. We also have a lot of the camera moves, where you're doing transitions with the camera, with match cuts, or where you put something on a camera and then take it off and you're in a different location and stuff like that. And so this is very, very overproduced. But this is also a comedy number. So you find what I touched on a second ago, where there's a point on the internet where if you're too produced, your audience either stops watching or it has to be a comedy. Because this was so comedically overdone, it was so choreographed, it was an ensemble, it was lighting, there was this huge band behind them. It seemed so overdone, especially considering that this was a YouTube video that you may not even get to see depending on which option you chose. So you really have these two kind of distinct categories on YouTube as far as the average low-budget musical goes, where it's either pretty well produced or very much overproduced, and that really only works if it's comedy. Both of them have a pretty good production value, probably not quite as good as TV, again, because TV is normally written by professionals and has some rounds of edits and is professionally recorded and stuff, whereas this might be, but generally isn't. But it does its job. It's entertaining, it's shareable, it's pretty watchable, and that's, at the end of the day, that's what it's trying to accomplish. So overall, I don't think that low-budget musicals, at least not most of them, have the same production value and probably just quality in general as a professional Broadway or movie musical, because they can't. They're not generally working with people with as much experience or skill, because those people are busy working on professional things. They're not always going to be as well done. They're not always going to have every single element of a musical checked off, but they're often just fun to watch. So really, I think that they're different from professional musicals. The production value isn't going to be as high, but they're fun to watch, and I think people making them, as long as they are enjoying themselves and are putting hard work into it and are creating something that people want to see, I think that they're great. And I love watching them, and I hope that people continue to make them. That's our show, everybody. Next week, I'll be talking about improv and all the facets of that. See you next time. Have a great week.